There we go.
Oh, can you see me now?
I can see you.
Ah,
Hello, how are you?
hello. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, very good. You?
I'm fine. I can't believe it's been a week since since that torrential
Yeah.
downpour.
Just gone to put that coat on. And I've just got this iron bolt in my pocket thinking, what is that? And I'm like,
What's
oh, yes.
Oh, what you collected all the what we would call scrap, but you collected
Yeah,
it as interesting artifacts.
yeah, exactly. Well, there's a bolt on there, but there was also a couple of like flints that we were kind of speculating, or
Ah.
maybe not.
So I'm going to start by saying my guest today is Mr. Paul Whitewick. Thank you very much, Paul, for being here. Researcher, explorer, storyteller of the Wessex history.
Why not?
You do love a mystery, don't you?
I do love a mystery. I think YouTube demands a hook on a video, and I think you can always try and sell a mystery at the start of the video. If you sell a mystery, then you've got them hooked. I mean, we started the channel myself and my wife probably 7 years ago, and we fell into it by accident. Really, we just sort of started making a few random videos about exploring some old places, in particular abandoned railways, canals, and old routes like that. And yeah, I think as time's evolved, I've just sort of said, you know what, I'm just going to make videos on stuff I find interesting. So if I come across something on an old map, if I come across a subject that I just randomly come across, I think I want to learn about that. So my videos aren't sort of me trying to teach you stuff that I know. They're kind of videos based on me learning as well. So I want to learn about the thing that I've just discovered. And yeah, I kind of think, well, okay, let's research this. And I'll spend 2, 3, 4 days researching. And so the channel sort of just has now evolved in its current state as stuff that falls into my net of interests.
Okay, I like
um,
that.
Largely anything historic. I mean, again, we started on old railways, but we sort of went further back in time. You know, we went back to old abandoned canals and the history, and then we sort of old sort of routes, ancient trackways, and then we fell into Roman roads, and we sort of love that because there's a lot of questions that are still unanswered, and people still don't know the answer to. And you think, oh, I love that. So yeah,
That's what I love about your channel. As a metal detectorist, I love this that you challenge what you read. You don't just say, "Okay, that's in a book. I'll just that's that." You go, "Hang on, no, this does not stack up. I'm going to go out. I'm going to learn about this, and then I'm actually going to go into the landscape and walk it and kind of just think to myself, does this make sense?" So you sort of, as a detectorist, that's really interesting to me because I also like to do that, like to get out in the landscape, and I'm learning through objects that I'm finding what's been happening on a certain piece of land.
I think yeah, you're right. What we do is a very similar thing in terms of trying to understand a picture of a bit of history. You've got a tangible object, and yeah, I'm looking at a lump of earth or whatever it is, a hill or something, and try and piece it together in the same sort of
Yeah,
way, probably, I'm
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
I think there are some real alignments here, which is why I asked you, and you very kindly said you would help and share some of your techniques for research. You've described your love of research as really driving your projects, and you've got this kind of infectious curiosity about you and the way you attack your subjects. And I guess a lot of us as kids are told, like, don't ask why, just is. But you seem to have somehow retained that curiosity and really want to ask those questions.
Yeah, I mean, no one likes school, do they? Really, let's face it. Who loves school apart from maybe the social side of it? Yeah, with
Yeah,
your mates. And I think school does just that. I never want to fly in the face of sort of academic research or anything like that. But yeah, at school you're taught stuff. It's in a textbook, and that's it. End of conversation. Here's what it is. And yeah, it depends on the teacher, but to be inspired at school is such a difficult thing. And yeah, I was not inspired at school. It was subjects I wasn't interested in. I think when you grow up, you turn into an adult, and sort of life settles down for you. You retain an interest in your community, and at least I do, and you sort of retain an interest in stuff that's around you. And, I want to learn a bit more about that. And so all of a sudden, you want to learn rather than you're being told to learn. And when you want to learn, I think that becomes a bit addictive. You're like, oh, well, I've just learned this amazing piece of history from the hill fort that's only 2 miles away. And you're like, this is so cool. and all of a sudden you just become inspired to go, oh, well, what else is out there? And it's just a rabbit hole.
It's the connections for me. When I find one thing and it leads me down a rabbit hole of research, and then it connects to something else, I'm like, ah, right, now this is making sense. This passage of time, where before at school you're learning it like a series of monarchs and dates, and it just doesn't have any meaning. And now I'm holding an object. I'm like, that's a person. There's a person behind this. There's a human story here.
And I'm sure it does bring up some mysteries for you. I won't go into too much detail, but obviously one of the coins we found a week ago.
Yeah.
It's like, what is that coin doing there?
I should probably explain that a week ago I came to see you on your home patch, and that was to go metal detecting together. And you hadn't experienced metal detecting before, although you obviously walked that landscape many times. And we spent a day in torrential rain, pulling up mixture of things from all across the area.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I know the guy obviously very well that we went on his land.
Yeah.
And have been around there quite a lot. But in terms of metal detecting, yeah, it was my first venture out.
First experience.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed going there with you, because the great thing about that was having Paul Whitewick behind you in your metal detecting, is that you know that place really well from the research you've done, and the fact that you understand the context of where you live in a great detail. With a metal detectorist, what we're trying to do is understand a permission that doesn't have any record in history. It's usually just a collection of fields. Maybe it's a whole property, maybe it's a part of a property. But apart from the things that we find and maps that we can look at, there's really very little written about this little piece of land. So what we find ourselves doing is kind of getting to know it intimately through finds, and also through walking it, painstaking, as you saw. So it's slow work, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of kind of dedication. And I often think to myself, I reckon I know this bit of ground as well as any medieval peasant that worked on it, because I've walked this land up and down. So it was great having you there. So, oh, there's a Roman road just to the side of us here, and over there there's a Bronze Age, and you were able to set that context. But for normally, we don't have that context with a permission. So what I'm hoping we'll get out of this conversation is your tips about how you would approach researching a place.
There's 100 different sort of resources that I would use. I mean, the videos themselves sort of take shape by me having a thing I want to learn about. And yes, the narrative is very much sort of, I'll write the intro last almost, because that's kind of how I want to frame the story of me learning, just so it makes it more tangible. Because I'll give you a good example. I'm doing a video on hill forts soon, another video on hill forts, in terms of specifics about water. And I kind of know what the outcome is, but I want to take people on a journey of a number of these hill forts to get to the outcome that I already know what that is, if that makes sense. So my videos are very much sort of, I'm really researching heavily 5 or 6 hill forts that I can give a bit of context to and still come up with the same conclusion, because I know what the conclusion is, if that makes sense. So YouTube is very much about building and visualizing the story. But in terms of how I'd go about that, the research on those individual hill forts, oh goodness me. So the end goal, as you say, is to walk the landscape. That's sort of the last thing that I would do, because that, as you said, that gives you so much more, that feeling of being there. As with you with metal detection, you're seeing all the lumps and bumps of the landscape. It's just got so much more context by just visualizing the horizon. But in terms of research, shall I screen share? Would that be an idea?
Yeah, go ahead. I've set you up.
This is a site I use called Archi UK Maps. It's not just maps. So I pay a small subscription to this. I think it's like $6.99 or something a month. But in terms of its usefulness, your money for your what you get, this is the absolute best thing you can imagine. You can literally go to let me just get a grid reference, pop in a grid reference, and you can minimize the search area, and you can look for every sort of major historical epoch.
Oh wow, okay.
And it will give you everything that's been scheduled, everything that's been found. You can do it in map form. you can then get all the old maps on here, the LiDAR. This is almost like a shortcut to all the sites that you would sort of go to first. It depends very much on the project, what you're looking for, as to what this brings up for you. But this is sort of my go-to for everything, sort of in a nutshell, the sort of the last thing. But what else? You probably all know very well National Library of Scotland maps. They're
Yes,
online,
I
free
do.
to
Yeah.
use.
Hmm.
And they've got so many sort of different features. There's one particular feature which I'm going to show you because it's the most exciting thing ever.
Okay.
If you convert them to 3D,
Oh,
and
wow.
then you up the vertical exaggeration to 2.9 or 3, well, you get this ridiculous.
Oh, wow.
You're
It's
looking at a 3D map.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like the graphic has been wrapped over the LiDAR map.
Yes, it's like if you're struggling to look at an OS map and sort of visualize the landscape from the contours, because sometimes it's tricky. Sometimes I read it upside down and think, what's a hill is not a hill of the valley. This is just the most beautiful thing.
What we're looking at there, that particular map is an 1892 to 1914 map. So we're seeing the landscape as it was then, with its rivers, with its hills, with its little hamlets and villages, before all the modern day big roads, etc. So it's actually as close as we're going to get, that is, isn't it, to a 3D LiDAR
really is.
of its time, if you like.
And I mean, to show how much it exaggerates, well, that's a railway embankment, and it's not that much of an embankment. It's only about 8 meters high, so you can see how exaggerated it is.
Cool. Can you just remind us how you did that, Ben? So you chose a map. You're in the georeference
Choose
section.
map. Yeah. So I've gone to the overlay section. I don't know why. I don't think you need to do that, but you go to the overlay section, and literally at the top of the middle here, you've got 3D.
3D.
Click on that.
Okay. Wow.
It takes a bit of time to render, but then you can then go to the exaggeration. So I've got maximum exaggeration because here's a great example of a wall. No one knows really what this wall is, but it's sort of Iron Age and a bit older. Now, on modern LiDAR, all you can really see is this part of it. And it's a scheduled monument, but the assumption was it sort of followed this hedge line here. This is a boundary, no sort of boundary between Basingstoke and Andover. But actually the entrenchment carries on up here, and you can just about see it if I get down really low.
Oh, yeah.
And you can sort of follow it on further north. And just things like this are so useful in terms of before you go out into the ground, well, what can you see on the map?
That is so much more of a useful way to look at a 2D map, because I get it now. I get what all those contour lines mean. You know, we all know they're a hill, but when you see it like that, I find that a very, very useful way to look at maps. Thank you so much for sharing.
No, it's brilliant. And the fact you can put it on an old map as well.
Let's pretend, Paul, right, that we had a permission, okay, somewhere in the sort of emptier part of that map, some of those fields perhaps on the right side where there's not much going on. There's a field, you found a perfect example, there's absolutely nothing on it. I can see an old footpath to the right of that boundary and one along one edge, but there's not a lot crossing that field. And like, how would you attack that? How would you look at that piece of land which has got not much going on there? And then how would you look at the context of it?
Yeah, I'd start with OS map. I think that let's find that bit of land, which is probably there. Where are those? Yeah, so this is now all houses, unfortunately.
Oh wow!
Yeah, for the sake of that there is that there. Wow. Unfortunately, but yeah. So we'll assume it's not houses because we'll assume, as you said, you've got permission on this bit of land. I mean, really and truly, the first thing I'd be thinking of is, okay, where are the settlements? People are going to be travelling to and from settlement to settlement for a variety of reasons. Old coaching routes, 100 different things. And the older maps often give you so much more than the newer maps. Yeah, are there milestones? Are there mile markers? Not just the obvious Roman roads, but if you find mile markers out of context, as you say, old footpath across here, fantastic. That's a great start because you're looking at two conurbations, albeit not, but you might be looking at people living in this place here, East Anton, maybe working here.
So it's highly likely you're going to have people, perhaps workers of the estate, riding into the village to pick up provisions, or maybe you've got farm workers who live in the village traveling there to work. So sort of you can start to get this sense of who's moving where, and maybe might look at how old that village and that settlement is.
Yes, I think the website is britishhistory.ac or something like that. It's so good for sort of specific village history. So british-history.ac.uk.
Brilliant. Okay.
And this is a local village called Werwell, and it gives you so much, just about, it's a tiny little village.
Wow.
But again, going back to what you're saying, is the context is everything, because you'll learn so much about that specific village, what went on there, who would be traveling to and from through it, and therefore the roads in and out of it.
Yeah.
Was it on? I mean, here's a great example: the Harrow Way. So the Harrow Way was supposedly a route that went across the south of England, potentially an old pilgrimage route. So again, you're looking for, it's a very different context to the village side, but again, it's a passageway over,
Yeah.
it's a pilgrimage route.
So if you see something like that on a map which says, you know, Harrow Way, or if there's a way or a ridgeway or something that's named, a named route, you would then perhaps research that route to find out what it's part, is it part of a bigger kind of route that may have been there for a particular purpose.
Yes, most definitely. Wider context of that road, you'll also find that the village histories will have something on if that Harrow Way passed through one of those villages. So it's worth having a look. Right, where does this Harrow Way go? Right, well, it goes through a village called Whitchurch, probably, or just north of it. So look at the Whitchurch history and see if it mentions a Harrow Way, because that'll give you some more context. Were there inns provided? That sort of thing, just the random little details, and look for what the sort of people that would be passing through that using that route.
Whilst it might not tell us exactly where to look, although you could probably say with that example, Harrow Way, if you were to check the side of your field that was closest to Harrow Way, you might find things that have been left, objects that have been left along the edge of there where people have maybe stopped and eaten some food or had slept overnight or whatever. But in a way, you could almost flip it around and say, when you find an object, you can now start to set its context by what you know about the Harrow Way. So you might, if you found something, you know, something to do with pilgrims, you might be able to say, well, I know why that's here. It's not just a random thing in the middle of a field.
Most definitely, yeah. And with that, there's so many other types of routes. As we've obviously mentioned, the obvious Roman road, but then obviously you've got drove routes, and you're going to obviously fit the fines into old drovers' routes. But the other thing to mention as well, whilst we're on about routes and that, something that I know very little about, Anglo-Saxon charters. Incredibly useful. If you can find an Anglo-Saxon charter that sort of covers the area that you're in, that will give you so much more context. There's again, I don't know what they are, but there's websites where a chap called Grundy translated all the old English Anglo-Saxon charters and turned them into sort of the language that we understand today. And that can give you huge context, because that will help you identify even things like a Roman road that we don't know about today.
Okay.
It can give you all sorts of old English for the word springs, certain trees, Roman roads, any mention of the word stretta, and you found a Roman road. It doesn't have to be a main via, but it could be sort of a secondary or tertiary, an actus, or what's the other word? I can't remember. There's another one. But again, it will give you context to where you are, and all of a sudden you may have found yourself a Roman road. I think I did a video a few weeks back where there was one in Oxford, and we found the Port Way used to be called an Anglo-Saxon charter Port Stretta. So straight away, all of a sudden you've got yourself a Roman road, Stretta, and there's a few other things on there that mention Stretta, Stretfield Farm, Stretfield Break, and all of a sudden you've pieced yourself a new route. So if you're close to that route and you're finding your Roman finds, and you wonder why you're finding Roman stuff, because maybe there's no villas or nothing of context, or maybe you actually have found a Roman road.
That's
So
super interesting, actually. House names and stuff. I haven't thought of that. So, okay, Anglo-Saxon charters can give us a sort of new vocabulary, really, to add to
yeah,
this whole research program, because you can notice things then that might not be on any map.
there's a wonderful YouTube channel by a chap called Allotment Fox, and if
Yeah.
you want to sort of a basic in to Anglo-Saxon charters, go and watch this guy called Allotment Fox. He spends 3 days a week walking Anglo-Saxon charters. So he
Wow.
literally takes Anglo-Saxon charter, converts the Old English himself, tries to find all the markers, because and so an Anglo-Saxon charter, for context, is basically describing a chunk of land. So the king at the time, whatever he was given this land to Winchester University. He gave the land to this person, gave the land to that person. And the way they would give a chunk of land to somebody is describing the boundary of the land. Or they had no means of marking it formally in a GPS sense or whatever. But they would say, right, this is your border. And they would literally describe the border of the land. And they would literally see, and then on to the willow tree, and then on to the spring by the port strata, and then on all this beautiful language.
Wow.
And
Okay.
it's described you a chunk of land. And this guy called Allotment Fox, who I've got a fascination with, just literally walks Anglo-Saxon charters, and it's a fascination because it opens your mind to this whole new level of research. You think, oh my god, I can't read Old English, but this guy can, and it's such an eye opener.
I do sometimes use the Domesday Book references to try to place some of my finds in some kind of context. Like recently here, I found a coin, an Edward penny. It was from the 1200s. I know a lot of people find these little hammered coins, but I was like really keen to find out what kind of person might have owned it. And through using the Domesday Book, I could see that there was nothing here in the sort of 10, I think it was written in 1086, something like that, the Domesday, sometime around then anyway. There was nothing here, nothing marked in the book, apart from a couple of miles away, there was a very small hamlet, and it tells you how many animals they had, how many slaves they had working on the land. So I knew there was nothing here then. And then there was a church built in the sort of early 1300s. Well, this coin was dated somewhere between the two. So it stands to reason then that the person that dropped that coin can only really have been here building that church.
Oh, that's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that shows you how much research you could do to give you context. And it's just endless because, okay, yeah, right, where that person building that church, what was it made from? Where did they quarry it? All those sort of questions. They're brilliant, aren't they? Obviously, you've got the OS map, classic OS map. I don't need to tell you too much about that, I'm sure.
No, I mean, talk how you use these things, because this is useful to us. Because I mean, I've seen an OS map, but I mean, how do you use an OS map?
Yeah, I like to zoom into this scale. I never know what this is, 1 to 25,000. Because it just gives you that extra detail. You can sort of distinguish more between open access areas of land. You've got a lot more detail on here. They'll mark on the sort of the earthworks of a Roman road right there. And that's a beautiful bit of agger that still remains. And by and large, if you see those earthworks, they will still be present today unless there's been modern building on it. And I guess this is probably what started my love of the landscape when I was a kid, is looking at just old maps. And I'd just go and cycle somewhere and just go, well, I wonder what that is. I had no interest in the history behind what that was, but what did that thing on that map look like? And I used to go cycle somewhere and go and see it, and hey, cool, we made it, and then go home again.
It's really interesting what you're just saying about that little Roman bit there. That work, which has obviously got the telltale straightness about it. I just wondered if you have any tips about patterns that you notice in field systems or roads that would give you or junctions that would give you a clue that Roman activity here, or medieval field systems or whatever. Do you have anything you're looking out for?
I mean, map wise, just zoom out. And straight away on this map you can see two major lines. And again, I know this area quite well, so it's quite easy for me to do that. But you've got the line here, and you've got another sort of, I'll say east-west, it's not east-west, but you get the idea.
And then
all the way through there.
crossroads in the middle of it, which
Yeah,
potentially is a really important junction. That's super
yes.
interesting. But I would certainly, as a detectorist, never scroll out that far. But isn't that interesting? You can see
It
it.
just helped flipping over then to a website I tend to use quite a bit. So saxonhistory.co.uk. It's a fascinating website run by a chap called Simon, but he is one of the only people to have done what is quite a comprehensive map of Roman roads and major settlements. There are a few out there, but this guy has listed all of these. So again, that crossroads that we're looking at now, that's there.
Wow, look at that.
So this is a really good website
How did they
for.
make them so straight, Paul? I mean, I know how hard it is to walk in a straight line because I use a GPS tracker, and even walking down one field, length of a field, you veer off, you veer off, you veer off.
Yeah, it's a great. Yeah, that's a whole nother question and another video. How do they do it, right? Because you think, okay, Gromers. You look at any textbook, and a textbook will tell you, well, they use beacons and Gromers, and that's obviously true. But the work involved potentially going back and forth.
Yeah.
Let's say you've got a line of 5 beacons over 20 miles or whatever. Well, that's great because you line up the first 2, line up the third. Right, well, now the second one doesn't like, so you need to move that beacon.
Yeah.
It's
There's a lot of
when you actually,
adjustment, isn't there, in that?
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
adjustments are the key. So, how did they do it?
They're just
Amazingly,
incredible.
really.
Hats off to the Romans, I say.
Hats off to the absolutely hats off to the Romans.
Yeah. What
Yeah,
an
they weren't always straight. Here's a great, sort of a little puzzle, an example I love. This here.
yeah.
I've made about 5 videos on this round section here because it doesn't add up to me. And if you go back to OS maps, there's an amazing sort of little set of clues you can use to try and decipher what's going on here. So here's your Roman road going in the line it's been going for the last 20 miles, and then immediately it turns left.
Okay.
And this is very Roman because there's short, straight sections. So that's great. But the question is, well, that's not a steep hill. Now, the Romans wouldn't tend to be used more than 1 in 4, maybe 1 in 6, worst case, as a gradient. But then you think, okay, well, this is good. What we've got here is Grim's Ditch.
Okay.
That earthwork there.
Mhm.
So now we know that this bit of Grim's Ditch was around about 600, 500 BC. So 500 years before the Romans came. So my question was, right, why did the Romans take this circle round here? Why would, if they wanted to get to this point here, why would they not do the straight line straight to there?
Yeah.
Why make an immediate deviation? Romans didn't make immediate deviations and then go back on the same alignment, but they did because then it carries on all up here.
Yeah.
So I took a look. I got some permission from a farmer, and I said, "Can I walk along this bit of Grim's Ditch, please?" And he said, "Yeah, that's absolutely fine." Lo and behold, if I flip to the LiDAR and go follow that route all the way up to where it takes that immediate deviation, through that little hill fort there.
Yeah.
Here's your immediate deviation.
Yes.
So it goes up here and turns left.
Left. Yeah.
I wanted to walk along Grim's Ditch here, and lo and behold, there's a cut in Grim's Ditch.
Oh yeah.
So the cut in Grim's Ditch says to me, on the exact alignment that the Romans at least tried to go that way, but didn't for whatever reason, backed up, took the immediate deviation. Because if you've got a cut in Grim's Ditch, well, that means that the Romans obviously post-dated Grim's Ditch.
Yes.
So you would expect to see a cut there, and there is a clear cut.
And there is,
in
and you can
Grim's Ditch.
see a short section of attempted. Maybe they got to
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
bottom of that hill and just thought, oh, actually, do you know what? This is a bit too much.
It feels not very Roman to do that, but
Yeah.
I can't think of another. I'm not saying this is a great new theory I've got, but
No.
look at that alignment. That alignment goes straight there. And that's kind of how I love to try and read the landscape. Try and work out a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, put yourself in there.
Yeah. The best way to get to know your permission initially is to actually just walk it without the detector.
Yeah.
Walk it, look, and use your eyes and look at the landforms. This idea of actually going in situ, walking the landscape, putting 2 and 2 together with the LiDAR that you've looked at, and then what you're feeling under your feet as you're moving up and down and looking at the horizon and the landforms on the horizon, that can give us a clue about how people may have moved around. If we put ourselves in the mindset of most humans, you would think you only need to think about it as a human, like, where do I feel most comfortable on this permission? Do I like tucking into this hedgerow because it's nice and out of the wind? Well, that's
Yeah.
highly likely where then our ancestors would probably have walked also.
There's obvious things that I'm sure your viewers will already know. Things like their HERs. So basically, every council is responsible for listing their own what I call historic environmental records. So
Okay.
anything that's scheduled, any fines, anything of interest, tends to go on a map and listed under the specific council. So a really good example is Wiltshire County Council. They do a good job with a lot of things like this, actually. You can zoom in, zoom out, and it reloads them for you. Here's a little project that I'm working on with Martinsell Hill, which is near Pewsey. And you can just click on these, and I click on that one there, and it pops over here. It says, right, Iron Age pottery. Iron Age pottery, friends. And you can view the listing, and it'll take you to the listing and tell you all about it. So HERs are very, very useful because it gives you this great big context.
It's added in finds that might not be listed on the Portable Antiquities Scheme website,
Yeah.
which is a reference tool that a lot of detectorists will use, because that records a lot of the treasure finds and metallic objects, but often not things like potsherds, which are equally as interesting because they set, you know, it's the kind of field finds that I make on my permissions that I think, oh, bit of pot, that's great, that adds weight to my theory, you know, or hobnails or things that aren't what you would call treasure, still, you know, add weight to what you're trying to do. So this is great.
I mean, that's really interesting actually, because there's one thing that says a spindle used for spinning.
Spindle whirl, yeah, that's
a
something.
loom weight.
Yeah, you do find those quite regularly.
Okay, but again, that's such a cool thing, because I think God, one of the antiquarians, Sir Richard Colt Hall, came here in like 1800, early 1800, late 1700s, and he said there was a settlement here, and he gave evidence of those sort of things, the loom and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So that fits really well. That's quite interesting, actually.
That's a great resource. Definitely going to use that one in the future. So you need to look up the council of whatever the county is that you're working.
Yes.
Then okay.
Not all of them. They won't look anything like this.
No,
this is
different.
One sort of example. They're all different, and I think Hampshire's is nowhere near as good as this, which is why I brought up this example instead.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's such a great thing. So you may find that your own personal council is not quite as good, or it's even better. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it's super useful. I think this has got building. I think yellow is probably buildings. Yeah, there you go. You've got partially extended 17th century farmstead.
Okay.
But again, that gives you, that's going back to what we talked about earlier, where it does give you that context of medieval farmstead. Right. Okay. Now you know there was an actual farmstead there, not just a modern one. Wikipedia is a really interesting resource. It takes some working if you want to use it, because number one, if you read anything in a Wikipedia article, take it as a pinch of salt first of all. But when you sort of dig deep into Wikimedia, well, then you can find sort of useful things like the old maps, because they've got a lot of old maps you can use. There are countless sort of, you can find all sorts of weird and wonderful things, not just maps. This is the Wikimedia Commons for Wiltshire, when you just type in the word Wiltshire, and invariably you find some old maps. And again, they're not old maps. Sort of, this is what 1576 by cartographer Christopher Saxton. Might not be very useful, but it's a fascinating read when you put it into context of the land you might be working with your metal detector. I guess the main takeaway from sort of maps like this is how important rivers and hills were for them, because the prominent thing that sticks out there really is the rivers, I guess, above all. But
that's super interesting.
LiDAR, again, LiDAR is a difficult thing, because there's probably about 5, 6, 7, 8 different websites you can find LiDAR information on. I think it's all held by the Environment Agency, who again you can access free, but working it is very tricky. So if I want some really high quality sort of detailed ones, I've got a friend who does it for me. And he can get the really good colours, because you can sort of alter the colours yourself, so it highlights things more. But in terms of LiDAR, yeah, I think even National Library of Scotland maps, as I'm sure you know, have got it as a background you can use.
Yeah, they have, and they've got a new one. He was telling me today. It's only been launched literally in the last couple of months.
Oh, really?
That one you're looking at now
Yeah.
is new, in some
Ah,
it's now lit up from 3 angles, where before it was only lit up from the northwest.
oh,
So you're
that's
now
great.
getting a lot more like definition,
Yeah.
on particularly on the things that fall on a northwestern line, which were kind of obliterated
Right.
by the shadow.
Oh, fantastic. So that's sort of the basics for me. That's where I'm starting with the landscape. And again, there are more we could go into. One more that I will share with you before I shut up about those is not necessarily quite as relevant, but a website called Rail Map
Yeah.
Online.
Uh-huh.
Two things that he does which are super useful: canals and railways. And I'll go into the railway one and just share with you the sort of the detail that this guy's got. Let's go to somewhere it's not going to clutter it too much. If I zoom into an area, so you can see every single line on this map is a railway, and then the layers are just absolutely insane in terms of what you can do. It's a modern railway layer, industrial, miniature, historic. Zoom in, and I can click on stationing and features, and every single feature on an
Ah,
old abandoned railway will come up. So it's another resource for giving you context to an area.
okay. So some of
Um,
these are not, some of these railways no longer exist, but you like to go and walk them, and this gives you
yes,
some sort of maybe some points where people were working more regularly. So if we were detecting somewhere where there may have been an old railway line, it would be really helpful to know that there was a point or a junction or an old station.
most definitely, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, probably will give you sort of, again, it's more modern history, but there's a lot of old canal tunnels, railway tunnels that were built by the navvies, and they would live in huts built purposely for them, or pubs built purposely for them near the tunnel they were
Ah,
building, and they'd
okay.
live a life there of 2 years. I think a great example is if I go to the canal one, and we zoom into here, Sapperton Canal Tunnel. There's a pub on the north side, I think, called the Daneway, built for the navvies,
Okay.
building this tunnel. So this tunnel here is 2.5 miles long.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, it took the navvies probably about 6 or 7 years to build. They built 26 shafts to build the tunnel, and then they had sort of 54 working faces. And again, it's obviously relevant to this area, but if you have context and you're in a field near there, you might be finding things to do with this.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. That's a really good idea to have a look at that if you're in an area where there's sort of a lot of industrial movement.
the detail of this website, Rail Map Online, is ridiculous. Every single lock on a canal that has ever existed. This is now
Wow.
abandoned, but they're still on here. Every single lock is existed, and because of course he's used um, Google, you can use Google Maps in the way you would, any other way. So you can zoom in. There's the
I
pub,
can see what it looks like. Oh, amazing. Yeah, just see
and
if
you
we
can
can look at
see,
the pub garden.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There's the old canal. Yeah, there's an old wharf of a canal and an old lock over there.
That's brilliant. So
Um,
do you jump from your map to the Google map? Was there a little sign?
that was the little dude down
Oh
here.
yeah.
So
Okay.
you grab him,
You
stick him
grab
in,
him. Oh, I see. Great.
and
Okay,
there is.
got it.
And and again, this was so useful for me in the early days of making videos because I want to go there. Where am I parking? So this is a nightmare for parking. So what we tended to do is go to the pub, um, buy some food, buy a drink, and tell her we're going to go for a little walk as well, and they're fine.
Yeah.
But Google, obviously it's Google Maps, but super useful in terms of where am I parking, what else am I looking for, what does the area look like.
Wow.
So
And
that,
I guess for you, it means you can sort of plan your day a bit and say, okay, right, I'm going to need my long trousers today because I'm going to be wading through,
yeah,
and you can kind of plan your activities like that. I mean, I think that could be really helpful for us as well, because sometimes you find yourself carrying way more than you need because you're sort of planning for every eventuality, and quite helpful. I
oh
think a lot
yes,
of the places we're detecting, you wouldn't end up having a Google image, but just access, I think, this is very helpful for. Wow,
um,
that's an
yeah,
amazing, an amazing selection of different tools there, Paul, that you've shared, because I think it's sort of giving me an insight into your process of how you you might start to sort of use your imagination matched up with some of these questions you've asked yourself, and then you overlay it with layers of maps and old routes, and all these different resources you've shared have been super helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries at all. Absolute pleasure. It's
a
all
quick,
project dependent, but
yeah,
yeah,
I guess each one's
you
different. Just a quick note then on finds. Have you, I know you haven't detected before, but yeah, I gather you will be soon.
know. Well, yes, Rebecca is yeah, very keen to have a go. Very
Yeah.
keen to get started.
Okay.
Purchased some equipment recently, and we've got a local, as you know, the local guy we know farmer, and
Yeah.
that's a lifetime of work
I think so,
if ever
yeah.
needed.
That's amazing. So you're going to be starting to bring some of that hopefully in some of your stories. But do you currently use, when you're walking, are you scanning? I mean, I'm a searcher, so I've always got my eyes down. I'm probably going to have terrible, that sort of hunchback when I'm an old lady. But do you look to the ground, and have you found anything ever just as a field find with, you know, an eyes only find?
Yeah, I think when you're walking through a field or on a pathway through a field or whatever, your eyes are always looking down, as you say. I've always tended to, I don't know what I'm looking for, don't get me wrong, but I'm always looking for sort of flints and axes of an old
Yeah,
age. I might give me half a second, I might have one right
yeah.
here, two
I'd love
seconds.
to see it. I'd love to see it.
Oh,
Have a look
so
there.
we found that,
Whoa.
um, and it's sort of heavily worked.
Yeah, you can see someone's made a good old start on that, haven't they?
Yeah, I don't exactly. I don't know how far in terms of
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? See, I'm not sure I've ever found a worked flint. Must have walked over a million, but I don't think my eyes are tuned in to finding worked flint. But I'd love to find it. I went to see the polissoir. Have you been there to the polishing stone?
No, I haven't. No. Is that the one in the West Woods or the
No,
one
it's the one on the
on the
Malta
Downs?
Downs, and it's really impressive when you actually,
Yeah.
you know, it's quite hard to find because it's off the main ridgeway. But when you find, someone kindly has dropped a pin on a map so you can actually
Okay.
follow it, and
Yeah.
it's now recumbent. It was once a standing stone, and it's now lying on its back. But the marks in this thing are just beautiful
Yeah.
sculptural marks, and each mark, there's probably about 6 of these kind of scrapes through the rock, and
Yeah.
each one has got a slightly different kind of camber to it, so you can tell that it's been used for a different part of the axe.
Wow. Okay.
Some parts of it
Yeah.
are really like fine, like this would have made a nice sharp point, and others are more deep, would have given it a more smooth round sort of shape to it. It's really
Yeah.
nice. And when I lay down on the stone, so I wanted to imagine how high up these marks would have been in real life, because of course they'd have had to
Yeah.
put probably a third of that stone in the ground so that
Yeah.
it would stand, and it was just the right height for a sort of shoulder height working. So it's just
Okay.
like
Yeah.
that. It was a place that
Crazy, isn't
just
it?
felt full of stories. You know, you could just
Yeah.
feel it all around. So you must go. It's really cool place.
Yeah. There is another one in the West Woods, not so far away. But I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it. It's sort of a lesser known one, but it's still
Ah, hey Paul, this has been great. That's given me
cool.
loads of ideas, and also made me feel super inspired to go
Excellent.
back and revisit some of the places I know well, but with new research tips and skills that you've shared with us. So thank you
Oh,
very
a
much.
pleasure. A pleasure.
See you later.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.